I still can't wrap my head around the fact that she actually called the police on me. The president of the local HOA completely lost it when I refused to let her so-called VIP guests access my private lake ranch. She rolled up acting like my family's land was some kind of public venue. When I politely declined, she absolutely snapped and dialed 911 accusing me of denying community rights on land that's legally mine. The sheer nerve of this woman was beyond comprehension. But here's where it gets wild. The entire meltdown was caught on camera, and it blew up in a way she never saw coming. You're not going to believe how this entitled HOA president ended up sabotaging herself. Hey there, Drama Nest family, let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from. So, here's the backdrop. I'm Jackson Reed, 35, a landscape architect who took over my family's 100-acre lake ranch after my grandfather passed it down to me 7 years ago. This place has been in our family since 1880, and honestly, it's been the most peaceful chapter of my life. Each morning starts with the sound of geese out on the lake while I sip coffee on the wraparound porch that my great-grandfather built with his own hands. Watching the sun turn the water gold, it never gets old. My golden retriever, Ranger, and I have a tradition of strolling the land each evening. That dog treats this ranch like it's sacred. My grandfather used to say, "Jackson, this land isn't just property, it's the heart of our family. Don't ever let anyone bully it away from you, no matter how official their threats sound." So imagine my surprise when, this past Saturday, I'm just lounging in my pajamas thinking it's going to be another relaxing day, a broken bar, and then this ridiculous blaring horn tears through the silence. I glance up and see this glaringly pink SUV-like, neon pink with gold accents charging down my private drive like it's fleeing a high-speed chase. Ranger goes nuts barking, and for a second I wonder if someone's in trouble. The SUV sends up a huge cloud of dust before screeching to a stop right in front of my house. I'm thinking, okay, this is either going to be very entertaining or extremely irritating. Out steps this woman dressed like she's headed to a corporate takeover, a perfectly styled blonde hair that probably costs more than I spend on food in a month, an immaculate white blazer, and designer heels with those famous red soles that scream expensive. But what really stood out was the bulging leather portfolio she carried. And then there was that smiley broken bar, the kind of grin a slick car salesman flashes when he thinks he's about to close a deal on a lemon. "Mr. Reed," she called out, waving like we were old friends, "I'm Cassandra Kane, president of the Emerald Cove Estates HOA. Today's a very important day. I should clarify, while my ranch borders their subdivision, we've never been part of their HOA. My grandfather made sure of that when the neighborhood was built 2 decades ago." But then she opens that portfolio and pulls out what looked like full-blown blueprints. Not just ordinary maps, these were detailed plans turning my land into some upscale resort, complete with a helipad, an infinity pool, spa areas, and something labeled VIP fishing lodge. I stared at the sketches, wondering if I was still half asleep and hallucinating. But she went right into her pitch. She was organizing some sort of green investment summit next month and wanted to host about 50 investors and government officials right here on my private land. There would be helicopter landings, catered dinners by the lake, and exclusive eco-friendly fishing excursions. Her arrogance was truly next level. And then she drops this monstrous contract in front of me, thicker than most novels, and says all I need to do is sign an exclusive licensing deal and get visa for just $1 a year. Now, I'm a pretty easygoing guy, but I'm not clueless. When someone offers you $1 for something clearly valuable, there's always a catch. So I told her, calmly and respectfully, "Ma'am, I admire your ambition, but this land has been in my family since 1880. We're not planning any events, and we're definitely not interested in turning it into some kind of corporate playground." I figured that would be that. Oh, how wrong I was. Her demeanor shifted in an instant. It was like watching a mask crack. That practiced smile twitched, her cheeks flushed, and her voice jumped a few octaves. "Mr. Reed, you clearly don't grasp the importance of this opportunity. These investors could inject millions into the local economy. You're standing in the way of progress." Then it got personal. She suddenly launched into a bizarre claim that her family had been meant to have this land 25 years ago, and that my grandfather had somehow wronged them. She called herself midrand and tried to smooth it over, But the damage was done. This wasn't just about buzziness, it was revenge. I stood up, and Ranger immediately took his place by my side like he sensed something was off. "I'm sorry, what exactly are you implying about my grandfather?" I asked, but she was already stuffing the plans back into her folder. "Oh, nothing, I just meant the community's needs must come first. You'll be hearing from our legal team, Mr. Reed." The way she said legal team sent a chill through me, but I wasn't about to let myself be bullied by some power-tripping HOA president with a vendetta. She stomped back to her ridiculous pink SUV, turned back to yell, "You'll regret this decision, Mr. Reed. The entire community will know who stood in the way of progress." Then she sped off like she was starring in a car chase movie, gravel flying everywhere while Ranger barked into the dust cloud. As I watched her vanish down the road, it hit me this was far from over. The moment I stepped back inside, I did what anyone would do. I looked her up. A quick online search for Cassandra Cain left my stomach in knots. Article after article popped up about shady land grabs, local development scandals, and something called pressure tactics used in residential communities. But the one that stood out the most was about a family named Thompson, a broken bar who had apparently sold their farm for way below market value after. What I found next made the hair on my arms stand up. In the middle of digging through old records, I stumbled onto something I wasn't prepared for, a city council transcript from 25 years ago. My grandfather had publicly opposed a major development proposal, one that was being pushed by a company called Cain Development Group. Just 3 days after that heated meeting, a broken bar, he died of a heart attack. And now, decades later, Cassandra Cain shows up at my door, portfolio in hand, trying to claim the same land her group had their eyes on back then. Yeah, I don't believe in coincidences that neat. But it got worse. One particular item in the public archives chilled me to the bone because it hinted that my grandfather's death might not have been as simple as it seemed. Let me ask you, would you have just sold the land to avoid all this drama, or stood your ground like I did? Drop a comment and let me know. See, the thing about modern conflict, it's not fought with bullets anymore, it's fought with pixels and propaganda. Within 24 hours of my run-in with Cassandra and her bubblegum-colored war wagon, my phone was lighting up non-stop. Apparently, the Emerald Cove Estates group chat had turned into a full-blown gossip tabloid overnight. At first, it was subtle. "Hey, anyone notice the lake near the old ranch has some stagnant water? Just worried about mosquito risks for the kids." Totally normal, right? But that was just the tip of the iceberg. Then came the photos, carefully edited, high-resolution images of my land turned into a horror show. Shadowy filters, creepy wide angles, and captions like, "Is this really safe for our families?" The crazy part? The photos had been taken from places on my property that aren't visible from the road. That meant someone had trespassed to get them. And just when I thought it couldn't get more over the top, an investigative video pops up on the neighborhood app. Picture Cassandra dressed like a CNN field reporter, standing solemnly outside my gate, with growing concerns about safety and environmental responsibility. She says with gravitas, "We must ask, is this property a hidden danger to our community?" The whole production was full-on theatrical, complete with ominous music and bold red text flashing across the screen. Community safety alert. I couldn't decide whether to be furious or impressed. I mean, who had time, and funding, to produce something this polished? And more importantly, why? But then they pulled their masterstroke. Side by side with their smear campaign were beautifully designed concept illustrations of what they called Emerald Cove Community Waterfront Park. It showed families having sunny lakeside picnics, kids running on pristine trails, and elderly couples walking hand in hand along a peaceful shoreline. It was a visual guilt trip and it worked. The comments started flooding in. Why can't he just share the land? So selfish. Think about the children. But things didn't stop at propaganda. One morning, I'm heading out for my usual coffee run and notice a guy with a high-end camera, long lens, tripod, the whole setup is systematically photographing my property from multiple angles. At 6 a.m., no less. I walked right over. The man claimed to be conducting an environmental survey for a routine inspection. Please, I may be a landscape architect, but I can smell nonsense a mile away. He was trespassing and lying. That same week, I received a typed letter in my mailbox. No return address, no signature, just this one message: current property ownership may not comply with modern inheritance taxation regulations. Recommend immediate legal consultation to avoid potential criminal charges. Someone was digging into my family's inheritance records, trying to find any thread to pull. This wasn't just overreach, this was a coordinated attack, and it was deeply personal. So I fought back. First step: security cameras, basic motion-triggered setups on key parts of the land. And man, thank goodness I did. A few nights later, the same photographer returned, but this time, he wasn't just snapping pictures, he was staging them. I watched him through the camera feed as he dragged dead branches down to the lakeside, tossed bits of trash around to make it look polluted, and even poured what looked like muddy water into a clean inlet. The kicker: the timestamps on his evidence didn't match the actual lighting in the photos. Plus, I had official county water quality reports showing crystal clear conditions. Then something unexpected happened. There was a woman, a young, probably mid-20s, who kept parking near the edge of my property with a laptop. Every time I saw her, she seemed uneasy. She'd type intensely, then pause, stare at her screen, shake her head, check her phone, and hesitate. Her body language told me everything. She was wrestling with her conscience. And then came Cassandra's next move, phase 2 of her campaign. A brand new, professionally designed environmental report began circulating, a completely fabricated, of course claiming that my land posed an urgent ecological threat that required immediate remediation. According to Cassandra, this was all about mitigation. That's what she called it in her carefully worded petition to the city council. She cited vague public safety concerns and made some not-so-subtle legal threats about protecting community interests. But make no mistake, this was no ordinary neighborhood dispute. The scale, the precision, it felt like corporate warfare disguised as local activism. Someone with deep pockets was bankrolling the whole operation. While they rolled out their campaign of misinformation, I got to work building a counteroffensive. Every evening, I compiled hard evidence, timestamped videos showing the clear water, certified reports from the county attesting to the structural soundness of the buildings, even aerial surveys I'd commissioned myself. I was putting together a dossier that would prove this whole thing was a fraud. Something told me this wasn't going to stay confined to social media drama. I also started looking into those other families Cassandra had casually mentioned during her earlier presentation: the Thompsons, the Millers, the Browns. At first, I thought it was a coincidence, but when I started digging, the pattern became impossible to ignore. Each family had gone through the same ordeal: accusations of safety violations, fake environmental concerns, legal threats, and an onslaught of negative online chatter. And one by one, they sold their properties for about 40% below market value just to escape the nightmare. The buyers in every case, shell companies. And behind those shell companies, development firms. This wasn't just a smear campaign. This was a coordinated land grab. Then I found the smoking gun. Buried deep in old county archives was a record I'd seen before, but now it took on a new, sinister significance. My grandfather had died of a heart attack just 3 days after challenging a major development proposal at a public council meeting. The proposal, a casino resort project backed by none other than Kane Development Group. At the time, everyone said it was a coincidence. Now, it felt like a warning. The final straw came when Cassandra published what she called a final community notice. It was a highly produced video, or the kind you'd expect from a PR firm, not a homeowners association president. Her tone was serious, almost funereal. This individual continues to resist necessary environmental safety improvements, she said, voice cold and controlled. Their actions reflected disregard for the well-being of our entire community. It wasn't just a warning shot, it was a declaration of war. But here's the twist. As I combed through hours of surveillance footage from the security cameras I'd set up, I stumbled across something Cassandra definitely didn't want anyone to see, something that could unravel her whole operation. What do you think I found? 3 days after Cassandra's veiled threat went live, I received a certified letter that made my pulse jump. A special emergency home meeting had been scheduled. Attendance was mandatory. The agenda was vague, but the message was clear. Discussion of immediate environmental and safety concerns affecting community welfare. Translation: a public execution, dressed up as a community meeting. When I walked into the community center that night, I felt like I was stepping into a courtroom where the verdict had already been decided. Cassandra had arranged the seating like a tribunal. She sat at a long table up front, flanked by 2 board members, her laptop plugged into a sleek projector setup, and at the center of the room, a lone chair, for me. About 40 residents filled the chairs, many of them visibly uncomfortable, unsure what they'd been summoned for. I spotted Eleanor Walshaw, a retired school teacher and one of the oldest residents in the neighborhood, scribbling furiously in her notepad, eyebrows furrowed with suspicion. Cassandra began like a prosecutor giving her opening statement. Tonight, we address critical safety and environmental concerns raised by members of this community regarding the private waterfront property on Ridgeview Drive. She was dressed like she meant buzziness, a navy pantsuit, perfectly styled hair, and the confidence of someone who thought she was untouchable. Then she launched into her PowerPoint, bold red title slide: a community environmental safety assessment, immediate action required. The presentation was polished, disturbingly professional. Drone footage I never authorized, fake environmental data, photoshopped before and after shots of my land transformed from hazard to utopia. It was propaganda, plain and simply but convincing. One by one, the slides built a case designed to scare: alleged stagnant water samples, cracks in buildings that have stood strong since the 1880s, fabricated testimony from so-called environmental experts claiming my land posed significant risks. The audience started murmuring. People I'd known for years were nodding along. It was working. But then in a broken bar something unexpected happened. Lily, the young woman I'd seen outside my property with the laptop, the one who always looked conflicted, was seated near the projector. She was running the presentation, and when Cassandra called out, "Next slide, let's show the financials," Lily, a broken bar, her hands started shaking. She froze. "Just pull up the budget overview," Cassandra said, a little sharper this time, but instead of the usual polished chart, something else popped up. A spreadsheet with a list of transactions, big ones, $180,000 in payments, all to an entity called Grandview Development Consulting. The room went silent. Eleanor Walsh stood up without hesitation. "Excuse me, Cassandra, can you explain these payments? I don't recall authorizing $180,000 in consulting fees. Who approved this?" All eyes turned to Cassandra, and for the first time in a broken bar she didn't have an answer. Lily looked stricken. Her face went pale as she fumbled to change the slide, but the damage was already done. Eleanor, sharp-eyed and calm with decades of experience as an educator, wasn't about to let it slide. Cassandra tried to regain control. "Those are routine administrative expenses," she said, her voice tight. "All properly documented and filed with the treasurer." Eleanor raised an eyebrow. "I am the treasurer," she said, "and those payments were never brought before the board." "Where exactly did this funding come from?" You could feel the room shift to confused whispers, skeptical glances. Cassandra's smooth exterior began to crack. Then she made her fatal mistake. Clearly frustrated, she dropped any pretense of decorum. "This isn't about finances," she snapped. "The real issue is Mr. Reed's refusal to cooperate with legitimate community safety measures." She pointed at me like I was a defendant on trial. "His obstruction endangers property values, puts families at risk, and if this behavior continues, we will pursue legal remedies." "We're talking about a $2.5 million lawsuit," she said aloud, deliberate, like a warning shot. You could hear a pin drop as the number landed. Faces changed. Neighbors who thought this was just about a zoning dispute suddenly realized they were watching a full-blown power play. But I was ready. I stood, walked calmly to the projector, and plugged in my laptop. "If we're discussing safety and environmental conditions," I said, "then let's take a look at the reality." I played fresh footage I'd recorded that very morning. Clear, flowing water with geese gliding peacefully, historic buildings maintained with care, wildflowers, birdsong, and sunlight on the lake. The contrast with Cassandra's apocalyptic slideshow was shocking. I heard gasps. Then I played the surveillance footage. "These," I said, are certified water quality reports from the county health department, each confirming there are no contamination issues. These are structural inspections, confirming all buildings meet or exceed safety codes. Then came the real showstopper, a carefully edited video compilation, a man moving debris around to stage fake hazard photos, trespassers sneaking onto my land to fabricate visual evidence. Timestamped, clear as day. The atmosphere in the room flipped. A young mother in the back raised her hand. "Are you saying those photos of broken bar were fake?" Eleanor was writing furiously, and around the room I saw it. Doubt, realization, anger, but not at me. Cassandra tried to claw her way back. "This meeting isn't about Mr. Reed's propaganda videos," she snapped. "This is about real safety issues, and I will not allow obstruction." Her voice cracked. The composure was gone. Her argument was collapsing. That's when Eleanor stood up again. "I move to table any decisions related to property actions," she said firmly, "at least until we conduct a full audit of these Grandview expenditures. The community deserves transparency." Several people nodded in agreement. Cassandra's plan was unraveling in real time. Cassandra slammed the gavel. "Meeting adjourned," she snapped. She started yanking cords and packing up her equipment, muttering to herself, "The board will review these matters internally. No further discussion tonight." She stormed out, leaving behind a stunned room, a lot of angry questions in the beginning of her unraveling. As the crowd dispersed, Lily approached me cautiously. "Mr. Reed," she said quietly, eyes darting around. "That slide? That wasn't a mistake." She handed me a business card. Her hands were shaking. "Call me tomorrow. There's something you need to know." What I didn't know at the time was that Cassandra already had her next move prepared, and it was brutal. 2 days after the meeting, a FedEx truck rolled into my driveway. The driver handed me a large envelope that required a signature. Heavy paper, gold-embossed letterhead. Inside were 47 pages of legal threats, courtesy of Steele Associates, a litigation specialists. The top page said it all. Immediate legal action of property violations, community endangerment. They weren't bluffing. And the signature at the bottom? Harrison Steele. I flipped through the materials. His bio was included like it was part of a resume submission. Harvard Law, over 200 victories in complex property disputes, specialist in community development law, photos of his estate, his Porsche, his wall of awards. Message received: "We crush people like you." The letter was a masterpiece of intimidation. "Dear Mr. Reed, you are hereby notified that our client, Emerald Cove Estates HO, represented by President Cassandra Kane, intends to pursue immediate legal action regarding your willful endangerment of community safety, and your deliberate harm to our client's reputation and business interests." A broken bar. It read like I'd already lost. But the number said they were the part meant to break you. $2.5 million in total damages, $800,000 in environmental remediation, $900,000 in property value diminishment, $500,000 in legal fees and punitive damages, $300,000 in emotional distress. They weren't just trying to sue me, they were trying to erase me. But the part that chilled me the most came near the end. Additionally, recent inquiries have uncovered potential irregularities in the documentation of your property inheritance. Title insurance fraud and inheritance tax evasion may warrant criminal investigation. They were reaching deep into family history, into anything they could twist into leverage. This wasn't just a civil suit. It was a message: back down or we'll bury you. The letter didn't just threaten to bankrupt me, it threatened to take everything my grandfather had left me. And then, if that wasn't enough, it hinted at prison time. Penalties may include property forfeiture and up to 10 years imprisonment. They weren't bluffing. I had 48 hours to comply, sign their community access agreement, stop all harassment of HO operations, pay for an independent environmental inspection, and hand over full financial records from when I inherited the land. Refusal would result in immediate civil and criminal filings. For the first time since this war started, I felt something I hadn't allowed myself to feel: fear. I sat in my kitchen, Ranger lying at my feet, just staring at the pile of legal documents. The weight of it all hit me at once. The legal system isn't built for people like me, it's built for people with deep pockets and deep connections. That $2.5 million lawsuit, it might as well have been $2.5 billion. Out of desperation, I pulled out the letter from that developer, an offer from the previous year to buy the property for $1.8 million, with mounting legal threats, rising fees, and the possibility of criminal charges. Walking away started to look like the only sane option. I stepped outside to my grandfather's favorite spot by the lake. It's where he'd sit and tell me stories about our family, this land, and the legacy he hoped I'd protect. Ranger, I said quietly, maybe this fight isn't winnable. Grandpa wouldn't want me to lose everything over a broken bar, right? But even as I said it, I could hear his voice clear as if it were yesterday. Jackson, sometimes doing the right thing costs more than doing the easy thing. But this land isn't just dirt, it's our family's soul. Don't let anyone steal that soul, no matter how fancy their threats. That's when my phone rang. It was Lily. Her voice was barely a whisper. Jackson, don't respond to anything yet. I need to meet with you tonight. I have a USB drive. What's on night? A broken bar changes everything. She sounded terrified. Cassandra made me do something today. It crossed every line. I can't be part of this anymore. We met that night in an empty parking lot near the lake. Lily pulled up in a beat-up Honda, nervously checking over her shoulder. Cassandra ordered me to fabricate a safety report about children playing near dangerous water, she said, voice trembling. She wanted me to Photoshop stock images of kids onto your property, and she planned to file it with Child Protective Services. Her eyes filled with tears. I signed up as a marketing coordinator to help build community and not ruin lives. When she told me to create fake evidence that could get children taken from their parents, I knew I had to get out. She handed me the USB drive like it was radioactive. What I found on it changed everything. Emails between Cassandra and Steele, coordinating an intimidation strategy, financial records tying the HOA to undeclared payments from Grandview Development, video footage showing the property before the staged damage, phone recordings where they discussed using pressure tactics to drive landowners into surrender. But the most explosive evidence was an audio clip, Cassandra's voice, cold and full of venom. The Reed property is personal. My father lost everything because of that old man. I don't care what it costs, I want that land. I want to destroy his family the same way they destroyed mine. There it was, the truth. This wasn't about safety, or the environment, or the greater good. It was a vendetta, a 25-year-old grudge wrapped in the language of bureaucracy. The paper trail was staggering. $180,000 funneled to Steele Associates for legal strategy, $75,000 to a private investigation firm, $45,000 to a media production company to create fake videos, $200,000 earmarked as a property acquisition fund, a pending closure, over $500,000 spent on a coordinated campaign to steal my family's land through fear, fraud, and false evidence. As I sifted through file after file, the fear I'd felt earlier began to morph into something else. Purpose, a righteous fury I hadn't felt since the day they first set foot on my land. Why are you doing this, Lily? I asked. You could lose your job, maybe even face legal risk yourself. She wiped away tears. Because it's the right thing to do. And because my little sister loves fishing at your lake with our dad. I won't let Cassandra use children as props in her scam. With this evidence in hand, the dynamic flipped overnight. No longer was I just some lone homeowner staring down a lawsuit. I now had documented proof of federal crime as mail fraud, wire fraud, conspiracy to commit theft, falsifying evidence, and more. Lily, I said, for the first time in days, cracking a smile, I think Mr. Steele might be very interested in knowing what his model client has been up to. The next morning, I walked outside, tore up the letter from Steele, and let the pieces scatter in the wind. Ranger, I said, patting his side, turns out Grandpa taught me more about fighting bullies than I remembered. It was time to show Cassandra Kane what happens when you threaten the wrong family. But when I finally opened every file on that USB drive, I discovered one last hidden folder, something Lily hadn't mentioned. Inside was one more secret, and once it came out, it wouldn't just cost Cassandra her HOA presidency. It could very well put her behind bars. The preparations were extravagant, over the top, even. A full production team arrived early, professional lighting, a branded banner that read Emerald Cove Community Green Initiative, even a catered lunch with eco-friendly labels. No expense was spared. Then came the spectacle. The infamous pink tank SUV rolled up first like some sort of royal envoy, followed by Senator Blake's black sedan and a pair of sleek luxury cars carrying the eco-investors. A videographer jumped out and began setting up equipment. Cassandra emerged last, poised and styled to perfection, glowing with staged confidence. "Good morning, everyone." She beamed into a live stream. "Welcome to this special event celebrating Emerald Cove's environmental leadership." At first, she had only about 50 viewers, mostly home members, but the scene immediately grew tense as her guests looked around, confused by the locked gates and prominent private property signs. Senator Blake leaned to her aide and whispered, "I thought this was public land." That's when I walked out, Ranger at my side. "Good morning, Senator." "Miss Kane," I said, stopping just short of the gate. "This is private property. None of you have permission to be here. I'm going to have to ask everyone to leave immediately." And right there, with her stream still running live, Cassandra made a fatal mistake. She turned toward the camera and declared, "Everyone, what you're witnessing here is Ma'am," he said slowly, "do you have permission to be here?" That's when she dealt the final blow to her own case. "Permission? I don't need permission. My family deserves this land." Officer Peterson sighed and pulled out his handcuffs. "Ma'am, you are under arrest for criminal damage, reckless driving, and trespassing." I stood silently with Ranger as Cassandra Kane was placed in the back of the patrol car, still sputtering about injustice, still live streaming to over 10,000 stunned viewers. And in that moment, something hit me. Sometimes, justice doesn't need a courtroom. Sometimes, it just needs a camera and 10,000 witnesses. That night, I got a call from someone I never expected. They had a confession, one that would turn this entire story upside down. Every sponsor, partner, and supporter vanished overnight. Emerald Cove's Green Initiative was radioactive. No one wanted to be within a mile of Cassandra or her crumbling empire. She now faced a mountain of serious criminal charges: destruction of property, reckless driving, trespassing, public endangerment, and over $15,000 in damages just from the gate. Her insurance company refused coverage, citing deliberate and criminal behavior. Her political allies gone, and to make it worse, the professional videographer she had hired released behind-the-scenes footage titled, "Exposing the Setup: How the Emerald Cove livestream was Staged." I thought that was the final chapter. It wasn't. At 10 p.m., my phone rang. "Unknown number, Mr. Reed. This is Robert Kane, Cassandra's husband. I need to speak with you tonight. It's urgent. I have information you need to hear." His voice was trembling, worn thin. He sounded like he hadn't slept in days. Robert arrived at midnight in a luxury BMW, still in his tailored law firm suit. But the man who stepped out looked like a ghost of himself, 10 years older than the last time I'd seen him. Haggard, defeated. "I'm here with my attorney's full knowledge," he said quietly. "But I need assurance immunity, witness protection, because what I'm about to share will blow this whole thing wide open." He handed me a business card, his lawyer's contact. The man was serious. Then he opened a leather briefcase. What he revealed over the next hour was nothing short of explosive. "I've been a corporate attorney for over 20 years, Robert began, his voice heavy. "I built my reputation on ethics, but what Cassandra has done violates everything I stand for, everything." He pulled out financial records, bank statements, spreadsheets, emails. "This company, a Grandview Development Consulting, was a shell I created for legitimate real estate projects. Cassandra accessed it without my permission. She funneled over $500,000 into this crusade against you." There it was in black and white: unauthorized transfers, payments to sketchy environmental consultants, private investigators, and what appeared to be bribes to city inspectors. And that wasn't even the worst of it. She paid for forged environmental reports, organized online harassment, and even bribed city officials to launch false inspections on your property. She spent money hiring social media consultants to attack you online. That entire troll campaign, she orchestrated it. He showed me receipts, emails, wire transfers. The evidence was airtight. It goes back decades. Robert said. Cassandra grew up hearing that your family destroyed hers. Her father's development empire collapsed after your grandfather exposed corruption. She's been obsessed with this land ever since we moved here. He handed me documents from their marriage counselor, psychological evaluations. The therapist's notes described pathological resentment, fixation on revenge, and a deeply rooted fantasy of reclaiming lost family legacy. But then, things got darker. She had private investigators manufacture inheritance irregularities. She tried to discredit your grandfather's will. She bribed environmental officers to fake reports. I have all of every contract, every email, every recorded call. Robert's briefcase held a box packed with documents and digital files. What he handed over amounted to an organized criminal conspiracy, involving city staff, falsified government paperwork, and coordinated harassment. Her original plan was small, just 20 lake-access homes, but after your grandfather passed, she went off the rails. She started talking about reclaiming the legacy, about finishing what her father started. He revealed a thick folder detailing 12 families who'd been coerced into selling their land at below-market rates using nearly identical tactics. The Thompson farm, the Miller estate. It was all part of Cassandra's expanding scheme. I tried to stop her, Robert admitted. I cut funding. I threatened divorce. I warned her she was crossing legal lines. But after that city council meeting where you stood up against her fee hike, she snapped. She said she was going to finish the war her father started. His voice broke. The weight of betrayal hung between us. I love my wife, he said, eyes glassy, but I can't watch her destroy herself or others. Our marriage is over, but maybe justice can stop this from happening to anyone else. And then came the moment that changed everything. There's one last thing, Robert said quietly. About your grandfather's death. He took out an old municipal folder. Inside were records and environmental reports dating back decades. Cassandra always believed your family ruined hers by exposing corruption. The truth? Her father was corrupt. Your grandfather's testimony stopped a casino development that would have been built on protected wetlands. That project would have poisoned the water supply for 3 counties. He looked me in the eye. Your grandfather didn't destroy her family, he saved this entire region. Cassandra's hatred is built on a lie. With Robert's full cooperation, the dominoes began to fall. The FBI's white-collar crime division got involved. The scope of financial fraud, bribery, and conspiracy stretched across multiple counties and agencies. The Thompson and Miller families came forward, now emboldened, bringing their own files and testimonies. What began as one woman's vendetta had exposed a multi-million-dollar web of corruption. Dozens of public officials, developers, and consultants were now under investigation. Robert agreed to testify, to surrender every document, and to make full restitution in exchange for legal immunity as a whistleblower. He was still a lawyer and protecting himself, but beneath that, you could tell he was a man trying to make something right after standing silent for too long. The personal toll was staggering. Sitting across from the husband of the woman who had tried so hard to destroy my family, watching him willingly dismantle everything to stop her campaign of criminality, I had to ask the obvious question. Roberta Brokenbar, why didn't you stop this sooner? He looked up, eyes hollow. Because I didn't think she'd go this far. I thought love could cure obsession. I was wrong. But there was one last truth, something Robert hadn't been able to bring himself to say before. A final, hidden detail about my grandfather's death. It made one thing devastatingly clear. This war had started long before I ever got involved. 6 months after the infamous pink tank crashed through my gate, the legal consequences rolled out like a slow-motion avalanche. With Robert's overwhelming cache of evidence plus Cassandra's own live-streamed self-incrimination, prosecutors moved fast. They offered her a deal: plead guilty to reduced charges, serve 18 months minimum in state prison, pay $500,000 in restitution, accept a lifetime ban from any HOA leadership roles. The alternative was a federal trial, with over a decade in prison hanging over her head. She took the plea without hesitation. Professionally, she was annihilated. Her real estate license was revoked permanently. She was barred from HOA participation statewide. Personal bankruptcy followed. The legal fees, court-mandated payments, and the mountain of restitution she owed me. Robert filed for divorce and was granted it uncontested. Even the pink tank got auctioned off to help repay the damages. Watching that monstrous, chrome-wrapped SUV get hauled away felt unexpectedly cathartic, like a piece of her madness finally being exorcised from the neighborhood. The community's response? Mixed. Just like real life. Eleanor Walsh rallied a reform group, pushing for transparency, audits, and accountability. Within weeks, she had enough support to demand a full financial audit of HOA records going back 5 years. But not everyone was thrilled. Roughly 30% of residents still supported Cassandra, claiming she had only wanted to boost property values and I was the one who had brought drama. The vote to remove her from the HOA presidency passed with 68%, a solid win, but not the sweeping rejection many had expected. Some neighbors apologized sincerely, a few brought homemade cookies, others offered help repairing the gate, but others remained distant, bitter over the national attention, still convinced I'd made the neighborhood look bad. I realized something. Real progress is messy, real communities are complicated, and I wasn't going to be seen as a hero by everyone. That's not how the world works. The FBI investigation blew past Cassandra like she was just the opening act. The fraudulent shell company Robert exposed a Grandview developmental led federal agents to a sprawling web of HOA corruption across 3 states. What started with one woman's vendetta turned into a federal investigation of developers, city officials, and state legislators. Some were caught accepting bribes for zoning changes and illegal land acquisitions. The Thompson and Miller families, inspired by what happened, filed a joint lawsuit and that case began morphing into a potential class action suit involving hundreds of families. Law firms jumped in, national outlets picked up the story. It became a case study in HOA overreach and property rights abuse. Advocacy groups lobbied for reform legislation in a dozen states, using my case as a symbol. I did a handful of interviews not because I wanted the spotlight, but because I believed people needed to understand how deep this kind of corruption can go. Mostly, though, I just wanted to get back to my quiet life by the lake. The most meaningful victory came quietly. My grandfather's land, our land, was officially designated a state historical landmark, granting it permanent legal protection from development. The irony wasn't lost on me. Cassandra's relentless attack had triggered the very preservation status she had fought so hard to prevent. In fact, property values around the lake went up thanks to that designation. The very neighbors who once opposed me now benefited from what she had tried to stop. Under Eleanor's leadership, the HOA finally began to change. Monthly financial reports were posted online. Meetings were recorded and open to all residents. Any expenditure over $5,000 now required community approval. Lily, once caught up in Cassandra's lies, was hired as the new communications coordinator. At a packed community meeting, she delivered a public apology for her role in spreading fake evidence. It took courage, and the community recognized it. She'd become an unlikely symbol of redemption. The case was now being taught in law schools, a cautionary tale in property rights, in business classes, as a case study in corporate fraud, in political science, as an example of grassroots resistance to institutional corruption. My grandfather, long misunderstood, was finally vindicated. A local historian even published an academic paper on his environmental activism. His story had become part of the official historical record, no longer whispered about in accusation, but honored for the legacy he left behind. As for Robert, he lost his law firm partnership. The scandal was too big, but he gained something far more important, the chance to make things right. He relocated, started over, and opened a small legal practice focused on HOA dispute resolution. He now uses his own hard-learned lessons to help other families who find themselves up against unfair associations or corrupt developments. Sometimes, even after catastrophic mistakes, people can find their way back. Not everyone, but some. And when they do, it matters. For me, this whole experience taught some invaluable lessons about standing up to bullies, the power of thorough documentation, and how crucial community support is when fighting institutional corruption. But it also showed me a hard truth: victory comes with ongoing costs. Some relationships were permanently fractured. My property taxes shot up because of the landmark designation, and I've had to stay constantly vigilant during HOA elections to keep corrupt leadership from sneaking back in. 6 months later, I hosted the first annual Lake Heritage Day at the property. About 200 people showed up, a mix of supporters, curious neighbors, history buffs, and even a few protesters holding signs debating property rights versus community needs. It wasn't a Hollywood-perfect crowd where everyone aggressive. Real life is messier than that. Kids played safely with Ranger while adults engaged in calm, respectful debates about balancing individual property rights with community responsibility. A local bluegrass band played on a small stage. Vendors sold food and crafts. The Historical Society set up displays on conservation efforts dating back to the 1800s. Their exhibit included documents about my grandfather's battle to protect the environment, a proof of how his testimony stopped the destruction of wetlands that would have poisoned the water supply for 3 counties. Visitors learned about the ecosystem he helped preserve and the lasting impact of his courage. His legacy was finally honored and documented for future generations who'll benefit from his actions. Standing by the lake with Ranger, watching families enjoy the property responsibly and listening to neighbors respectfully debate, I realized something important. "Grandpa," I whispered, looking toward his favorite fishing spot, "this is what you fought for." Not everyone agreeing, but the freedom to disagree respectfully to protect what matters. Democracy is messy and complicated, but it works when people participate honestly and hold their leaders accountable. The challenges aren't over. Property taxes are higher because of the landmark status. The costs of maintaining historical preservation are ongoing, and HOA politics still demand my constant attention. Victory isn't the end of the fight. It means accepting responsibility to protect what's been won and helping others facing similar battles. Just last week, I got an email from Wyoming. "Mr. Reed, I saw your story online. Our HOA is pressuring my grandfather's ranch to make way for a golf course. Could you share advice on legal strategies?" The pattern keeps repeating. Institutional corruption disguised as community improvement requires ongoing vigilance. I've started a simple website with resources for property owners facing HOA harassment. Looking down at Ranger, who's become something of a local celebrity ever since that viral video, I realized my grandfather taught me more than land ownership. He taught me responsibility. Fighting corruption is never finished work. Each generation must defend the freedoms the last secured. And that next email, it made me realize the HOA Queen was just one piece of a much larger web. That's how one woman's obsession with power led to her total downfall. Here's the takeaway. Sometimes the best way to deal with bullies is to let them destroy themselves, especially when they're foolish enough to live stream it. Property rights matter. Documentation saves lives. And karma has a twisted sense of humor. If the story taught you anything about standing up to corruption, smash that like button to help others find it. I'm your host @AnnaDramanest, and I'll catch you in the next one where we dive into another wild tale of justice served. Until then, keep fighting the good fight. What did we learn today? Probably nothing. But hey, wasn't it fun? Show some love with a like and don't forget to subscribe to @AnnaDramanest. It was a perfectly normal Tuesday. The sun was shining, the birds were gossiping in the trees, and I was sitting on my porch sipping iced tea, admiring my shiny Mustang, which, by the way, was parked squarely in my own driveway. Life was good, a broken bar, until I heard a loud clank. I look up, and there she is, the HOA president, Karen, armed with a clipboard, a frown, and a personal vendetta. She slaps a ticket on my windshield like she's in an action movie, then proceeds to boot my car. I blinked in confusion. "Unauthorized parking," she announced smugly. "In my own driveway?" I asked. "Rules are rules," she said, like she was declaring martial law. Now, what Karen didn't know, and oh, I was so ready for this moment, was that I'm not just a guy with a muscle car and a porch. I'm Judge Samuel Whitmore, retired after 30 years of ruling on real estate law. I didn't yell, I didn't argue, I filed. Fast forward 3 days, our whole operation collapsed. No legal authority, fake fines, and oh yeah, a tidy little $40,000 embezzled from terrified homeowners. And the final twist, I bought the HOA's assets. I now own the clubhouse, the pool, and Karen's once mighty president's bench. She clamped the wrong Mustang, and I parked just as right in her lap.